Welcome to Chapter 12. The Everything Engine helps us process failure. In Chapter 11, we explored the concept of failure and found that it was the defaulting current we are all working against. Failure is just humanity's manifestation of entropy, and it never turns off or goes away. Capitalism is our current economic reality, and it is further based around consumerism, not the personal ability of others, let alone their failures. This isn't good when paired with the for-profit medical system we are currently shafted with. Failing in a capitalist market is seen as an indicator of a personal lack of capability, so it's okay if weak people die, if homeless people freeze to death in the winter, or if the poor starve. We even confess proudly that capitalism is caveat emptor for the buyer to be wary of. The seller, they are a saint in this system. If a person dies because they can't afford their insulin, well, that sucks for them, right? Wait, they probably shouldn't be spreading their diabetic genes onward, right? The seller of products have historically been forbidden by society to be villainized for wanting to make money, regardless of the trash and promises they market and dish out. It is the buyers, the consumers, who are greedy for things they can't afford. If they hurt themselves, it is on them. People are making themselves sick. The greater society isn't doing that to them. Indeed, the classical view of emotions implied to many that some people are better than others, and capitalism is just seen as the sifting method between the weak and the strong. If we go back to history, we need to remember or even be taught that Hitler didn't invent eugenics. He borrowed his idea from America, including using gas chambers to control immigrants passing out the border. I live where there's a monument to an event called the Tacoma Night of Terror, which occurred in 1885, in which non-white inhabitants were forced out of their homes and into camps. 1885. Americans have been leading the charge on racial segregation since we landed, and we never stopped. And America evolved these ideas itself from its accepted classical view of emotions. And it's leaning towards the idea that some individuals are just better than others. This is what George Orwell was trying to capture in his book Animal Farm, in regards to the morphing rules written on the walls that were supposed to apply to everybody. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. The very concept of eugenics came around as a close-minded yet scientific response to figure out officially who might actually be better. The Olympics wasn't fast enough. It was already accepted, although not established, that white men were supposed to be the superior human group. It is the reason for the Tuskegee syphilis trials, which were performed by lying to healthy black men before infecting them with syphilis, refusing them treatment once it was discovered until they eventually died, just so researchers could watch the disease progress. This death is so debilitating that Al Capone, who also died of it, was let out of jail so he could die more comfortably. I've seen it from photographs in forensic lectures, the effects of syphilis on the brain, which is an image still seared in my mind. So if you want to see what it physically does to the brain, you can go ahead and check. Or you can just verify Al Capone's death and release and just infer. The Everything Engine gives evidence to balance the destructive master-slave model by enforcing the idea of the universal capacity of any human system to perform productively when given basic operating conditions without Gattaca-level extreme modifications. In short, the Everything Engine shows logically how we are all equal. Once we know what equal is and normal are, we can start supporting people properly. Creative and empowered people are our best and most valued major resource. Not products, things, or even hero worship. It's internal hero development that is needed. And people have been preaching this for years, but no one had the math to prove that it was an absolute truth. To overturn the other arguments so completely, they had nothing left to stand on. That is what it has and will take to create change. So first we need to get everyone to understand and accept a few things. So yes, the human system works if you work it. But if you are not made aware of your role in this process, you will still fail. If you are not properly educated about history and the external rules of reality, you will still fail. If your environment is biased against you, offers improper support, or is generally unhealthy and toxic, you will still fail. If you lack connection to a larger community that gives you access to additional updates or resources, you will still fail. And if you've been given all of these things, you aren't better than anyone else. You are lucky to not have had to fight for them, because these are what are needed to survive. This is the minimum. When someone we love is sick, is injured, or dies prematurely, in the classical view of emotions, we bemoan and ask the universe why bad things happen to good people. When something bad happens to a seemingly bad person, well, they deserved it. And in a capitalist society, when a person fails, we are taught to lay the responsibility for all of these layers at that person's feet alone. This ebb and flow of responsibility is another hallmark result of the classical view of emotions, which seems to only work for the masters. And instead of uncovering evidence and trying to understand all of the angles of truth available, we spend our energy looking for someone to blame or project that we are being treated unfairly. In the end, we give up and settle, bemoaning ourselves and our situation. And the reality is, the idea of good or bad people is moot. They are just people. All people make good choices which have positive repercussions, and dumb choices which have negative repercussions. And dumbness only appears to be evil when it is willfully ignorant, when a person knows they are doing damage and they don't care. But then by that point, it should be obvious that something mechanical is going wrong. They still shouldn't be labeled as evil or written off by society. They are manifesting a breakdown in the design of their personal everything engine. It doesn't mean they can't hack it. Otherwise, blame is everywhere and there's enough for everyone. But the solutions cannot only belong to a few. We all need to be in the same universe on this. The reason again is because failure is not the option in our reality. It's the default. Success in evolution, that is the option. And we need to appreciate this reality a little bit more, because the clock is ticking as climate change is bringing the floods and the fire. The everything engine reflects a human system, but do you see what it is lacking? Do you see what else makes this a valuable contribution to our modern society? It doesn't have a sex or a gender. It doesn't have a race or even a hint of a tan. It isn't old or young. It isn't from the north or south, the east or the west. It has no hair, height, or eye color, and also no favorite sports team. In all of these videos, I haven't really mentioned religion, but I haven't had to ignore it either. The math here is universally palatable. The everything engine represents the ideal. MIT economist Peter Temin came out with a survey and argument that, quote, escaping poverty requires almost 20 years with nearly nothing going wrong. So, here's the logical rendering of our current society. For 20 years, with little to no valuable education given per person, a capitalist economy requires people to be lucky enough to get everything they do right the first time, including their birth, or they are screwed and belittled by society because of it forevermore. This is why we should change our dynamic and try and see untruth, small lies, or blatant falsifications as data anomalies, like data bacteria that are producing information infections. These infections will and have become culturally systemic, but we can treat them clinically. The beginning needs to occur on many levels, but it starts by everyone, including you, simply caring about, demanding, and working towards establishing the truth. Why should you care about finding the proper interpretation of emotions or how we perceive and receive truth? Because it's costing you now, even if you don't know it. 900 million tax dollars was spent on failed emotions training for TSA agents at airports. There's bias in medicine, as women are seen as being overly emotional compared to men, who are accepted as the standard for healthy, balanced humans. Women are oftentimes sent home to die instead of receiving the proper medical care. Had a man come in and explained his version of the same situation. If you are Black, this increases. And if you are a Black woman, the chances of you being neglected further during childbirth, resulting in death, is 3 to 4 times more likely to occur. John Oliver and Wanda Sykes actually made an episode about this called Bias in Medicine. Did you know that there is probably not one single person who has contributed to the field of medicine more than one specific Black woman, and subsequently her family was forced to as well? This woman continues to save generations of lives all over the world, and many of the scientists involved don't even know her name. They simply call her Gila. The life and death of this woman exposes the repressive way in which Black women are treated and how slow the world seems to be in correcting for its violation. Rebecca Skloot's 2010 book unpacks one such reality in The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. 3. Wars are started. Saddam Hussein's half-brother was the one who advised him to go to war. The reason? He didn't think the American negotiators were serious about attacking based solely on their facial expressions. This isn't just an issue in the US. It's all over the world. It doesn't matter that we all speak English if none of us have the same context for the words and expressions that are used. We might as well be all speaking a different language. And yet, as a society, we still don't take communication seriously enough. And another quote from Dr. Barrett, which states that, more significantly, the classical view of emotions is embedded in our social institutions. The American legal system assumes that emotions are a part of an inherent animal nature and causes us to perform foolish and even violent acts unless we control them with our rational thoughts. This means that the court systems have the capability to deem a human not capable of rational thought. How about that for an illusion? The Everything Engine expresses the ideal situation for human operation, and it renders that everyone is capable of being rational. So knowing this, if a person does present with signs that they aren't being rational, this should not be seen in them as an indication of personal evil, but that they are merely missing facts, and this is manifesting in their frictional, or rather unpleasant, interactions with society and others. Their personal everything engine might simply be built askew, missing a piece, and they just need a different form of correction from reality. They can and need to learn how to hack themselves, but they will need help in order to do it. What recent decades of prison science has found hasn't stopped America's pride over stark and repressive prison systems. All over the world, they have found that rehabilitation works when the prisoners are given healthy environments in which to stabilize in. But by its reaction, America doesn't care because it needs to be seen as tough on crime. The Everything Engine represents the ideal. It is what is superior. It is what works at optimal levels. It's what's better than all of us. If we aren't like the Everything Engine, there are enough redundant systems that we can hack ourselves to its version of normalcy. Should we work together, or should we constantly compete? There are some schools of thought that have developed and teach the cooperative model, while others firmly preach the master-slave model, preaching that selfishness is the fuel that drives progress forward. This is the basis for the famous book by Ayn Rand called Atlas Shrugged that suggested that the people running the businesses were the geniuses behind the onward development of the rest of society. This is again why some people intuitively just follow Donald Trump, because he is at the head of a business, and that in itself is supposed to mean something. But it is selfishness that violated Henrietta Lacks, and this level of degeneration is deemed acceptable because it saved probably billions of lives. How many people do you know have polio? Yeah. And yet there isn't a Henrietta Lacks saved us from polio day. And the fact that we ignore her family, legacy, and the truth, people may think and dream to become a Trump-like master, but they have a higher chance of becoming a Hilo-like slave. These and others have been a part of the ongoing argument. And I'm here to say that the Everything Engine is the most rational, non-biased third party that can define boundaries. There is a way to address every past to present event and clearly define boundaries of what is not acceptable and what should be considered acceptable. Not everyone is going to want a neutral judge in this respect, but it is what our world needs right now. We need something everyone may agree on. The reason this is so important is that we need to establish failure for everyone as the default and stop the system of needless suffering. Being human and growing up is really hard enough. We don't need to add to it. With failure as the default, success is the option. But this opens the door for some very interesting dialogue. And guess what? Utopia won't just be a dirty word anymore. Coming up next is Chapter 13. The Everything Engine explores the plans for success when it's just an option.